Before, when you would ask me a question about like what my greatest accomplishment, he'd be like, yeah, name off all these movies and stuff that he did. And then he's like, now when you ask me, he was like, my greatest accomplishment was being my mother's son. That's where I learned everything. And it was just like, oh wow, like it's always nice to kind of hear like people who've kind of been on the quote unquote top of the mountain be like, this is what really matters. We've been given this definition of success that's not really the case. Like the definition of success is to be who God made you to be. That's it. You run your race. It's not my race. It's going to look different for you. To say like, hey, you got to make X amount of dollars, that you have to have X amount of kids, that you have to have X amount of cars, X amount of accomplishments. It's like God might not have had that for you, or you could have actually been successful in something that like, well, yeah, you were successful in that, but that's not actually where God wanted you to be.
How do young men like us optimize our lives in a way that lets us achieve success and meaning? Come with me as I interview top performers and delve into key areas of life: habits, finance, psychology, health, relationships, work, creativity, and business. I boil the ocean of men's advice into usable wisdom in this podcast to give you the answers. My name is Blake Bottrell, and this is the Distilled Podcast. My guest today is a self-described WifeOSexual, dad of 5, with a healthy football addiction. He's teaching men all over the internet to restore the spark in their marriage after almost 20 years of his own. His lighthearted antics and celebrations of his friends on Twitter have managed to unite both feminists and red pill guys alike. Joel Lopez, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, man. That's a pretty sweet intro. Thanks, man.
Try to get the start on a high note, you know?
Yeah. All downhill from now.
I wanted to sort of start 5 or 6 years ago, and you and the wife are sort of sitting in the car on date night, and you're like too tired to do anything else. What lesson about your marriage really comes up from that moment?
It was one of those things where I remember that because we were like going to go to the movies. It's like, should we go to the movies? It's just like, no, I don't want to do anything. We're so tired. I don't know if we were 3 kids deep or 4 kids deep, but we were tired, and like we wanted to do something. And I think it was really just like, there's all these moments where it was just like, yeah, you're my favorite person. Like, even if we're exhausted, even if we're tired, like this is where I want to be. This is not ideal. This is not like what people would consider to be fun, but it's worthwhile, right? Like I remembered that. Like this is a small moment. It wasn't like, hey, we were on some like expensive vacation and we had this great time. It was like, no, like this was for us to be able to go on a date. Like there's a lot of logistics that are involved with it too. So it's like, is there a babysitter? Yes or no? Is there somebody who can handle 3 or 4 kids? Yes or no? What's your schedule like? What's my schedule like? So there's all these things that kind of go into like being able to go on a date, and for it to end up just being like, you know what, we're just tired. Can we just sit in the car and like just have some quiet, just me and you, and like chill out here? It's just one of those things where it's like, it's just something that only you and your wife can share, and you're doing it together. And that just means everything, because that's what you like. A lot of guys will have these ideas of what marriage is going to be, and it can be whatever it is that you want to be, right? But I knew that marriage was going to be not like freaky sex all the time and like vacations. It was going to be like trips to the hospital because you have sick family members, kids crying all night. Like I knew that's what it was. And so it was like, here I am. I got what I wanted. Like I wanted this with her. And I just think that perspective helps me, because sometimes people could be like, why is this so hard? Well, it's like, well, nothing that's meaningful is ever easy. That's why when guys win like championships, right? Like they cry. Like, why are you crying? You just won. It's like, no, it's because you don't realize like all the things, all the like the late practices, all the times that they were, you know, working out and, you know, couldn't walk after a workout, or, you know, whatever it is that they did to get to that point.
Yeah, there's no one else I'd rather do this with.
Yeah. That's a phrase that like more and more, like I just I just this morning, like my daughter was up all night. She's 18 months. She was up a lot. Because she was up a lot, she woke up some of the other kids. So that woke up another kid. So like I was up a lot. And like I was sitting here working and my wife just came and she put her arms around me. And that meant the world because it's like you didn't sleep well either. I didn't sleep well. Like you started off the day like you weren't at 100%. You're maybe like at 25% because you were up all night with the baby. Like we all were. But to have that sweetness and that interaction was like that means a lot because you could easily just be snappy. I could be snappy too, but we choose to interact with each other in a manner that's, hey, like this is what we wanted. We chose to have these babies. All right.
Getting into sort of the team aspect of it, I know you've talked about sort of how things change as you have kids over time, and you're no stranger to the idea of teams. Is there any sort of qualities, maybe not in like individually person wise, but qualities that stand out as these are the 2 to 3 overarching themes in that team aspect when it comes to marriage?
So as far as like the qualities that make up a good team,
Yeah, is there sort of a corollary between a traditional team in a sense and bringing some of those aspects into a marriage?
like in a team, and especially in a team game, commitment. Like you got to be committed. In a marriage, though, I use it an even level higher, and I say covenant, because covenant now brings God into the equation, which I think is the reason that marriage and a lot of things are going by the wayside. Because it's like we've said, God, we don't need you to be a part of this, and then so He says, okay, good luck with that, and then we pay the consequences of trying to do it our own way. We've done that in school, politics. We've done it in marriage. But I think that men actually said no to God first, and then because men said no to God first, then they took him out of marriage, and now we have, the state of whatever you want to call this is. This is what we have because of it. So, covenant is basically I would rather die than leave you. I would rather die than to break the promise that I made in front of you and God. And then so whether she fulfills her part of it or not, you still do your part. So if she's, not sweet to you, you're still doing your part. Now, the Bible gives you ways out: adultery, abuse. Like you can leave, okay? So you kind of have to say that because people will be like, well, "What about this?" Like, don't be an idiot, okay? Like there's like if we're not talking about like adultery or abuse, you can figure a way out. So I would say the commitment is a big thing. Grace is huge. You need that in a team environment too, because nobody is perfect. So that's why I love football, because football is like, to me, like a microcosm of life. You have all these kind of moving parts that kind of go along with it. Football is not a game of perfect. It's a game of resiliency. And it's the same thing in marriage. There's no perfect marriage. My marriage is not perfect. It's just that we made the commitment. That's the kind of bedrock. And because we made that commitment, now we extend each other grace. Believe it or not, I am not perfect. Believe it or not, my wife is not perfect. I need to extend her grace. So there's a difference between mercy and grace. So mercy would be like if I just say like you did something to wrong me, and I'd be like, all right, that's cool, Blake, we're good. That's mercy. But if you did something to wrong me and I said, not only Blake, not only is it cool, but here's $1 million, that's grace. You did not deserve it. So that's, I think, if we're looking at it, commitment, grace, and gratitude. Like playing sports that's a privilege. Like your body is healthy, you can do this thing, you're able to do it. I think the longer that you're married, it's one of those things where you take it for granted. Like Save Your Sons had a post yesterday, and it was to the effect of like, this woman lost her husband, and she was on a run or something with this other girl, and the woman who lost her husband asked, what are you doing for dinner? And the woman who still had her husband was like, oh, my husband wants chili, but I think I'm going to go to the store. And the woman who lost her husband was like, make the chili. It's just like, yeah, because he's gone now, like, I wish I could make him his favorite dish. And like, that I think that's like the perfect human nature. Like for me, like my wife is my dream girl. Like I realize that not everybody like that's the case, but it was the case for me. And there's a kind of this thing where it's like you become accustomed to them. So it's like, oh yeah, like that's my wife. But like you forget those times when it was like, dude, I just want to be in the room with you. I just want to marry you. Like you forget because you get used to it. Like I don't know if you've ever kind of got to a place where like you wanted something so bad, but then like you got it and then it became the new normal for you. So then it's just like, oh yeah, that's just, like that is something that you can consistently have to battle. So as you asked that question, like there's actually something that I've been working on a course that kind of like takes care of this. But yeah, I would say covenant, commitment, gratitude, and grace. Those are like three foundational things that whether in a team or in a marriage are going to go a long way.
You talk about just sort of being in the room, and I keep referencing this tweet or idea that like find the person that you're comfortable just being in the same room with for extended periods of time, and that's who you want to optimize for, because the majority of your life is spent like alone together, and obviously stacking 5 kids on top of that adds an extra dimensionality to that. But how do you feel about optimizing for that type of person?
What do you mean by like optimize? Did I pick my wife knowing that she was like I enjoyed her company?
Yeah.
There's lots of pretty women. There's lots of like women who would be like good girlfriends. There's not, to me, there's like another layer of like, well, yeah, you're pretty, you'd be a fun girlfriend, but being a wife is different. And then being a wife that I'd want to spend the rest of my life, basically you're saying I'm going to spend the rest of my life with you. Like that's a whole different level. So like it was kind of easy for me because it was circumstances that cleared that up for me. So my wife and I were long distance, and so we met in like the pretty much the pre-internet era. So we had to write like love letters to each other, and I would talk to her on the phone for 1 hour a week. Like that's what I would get. Like I'd buy a calling card, and we had 1 hour a week to talk to her. So I didn't get to see her, so I didn't get caught up in the physical aspect of her beauty. It was I get to talk to you for 1 hour a week, and I actually enjoy talking to you. So like I'm a red-blooded man, like if we were together, probably like I just want to make out, right? And then it's like, oh, this is great. But those circumstances that sucked at the time were like, that's really where we built the foundation of like, hey, I have to sacrifice to go and see you. I have to sacrifice to be able just to talk on the phone with you. Like, and you have to do the same thing for me. So yeah, I think, I don't know if optimize or like vet would be like, if I was talking to a younger guy, like, hey, you're thinking about getting married. Well, can you just, do you just enjoy her company? Like, do you enjoy talking to her? Like not making out, like that should all be there too. So I'm not saying that like that's all important, because you don't, I think it would be cruel to not be attracted to your wife. I think that's cruel to her. But you want to be able to enjoy her company. Like going back to like that date where we were sitting in the car, there's been some dates where it's like my they weren't even dates. It was just like my in-laws are in town, so it's like, okay, they can take care of the kids. Like, we're just going to the grocery store, and I have a good time just like going to the grocery store. So our fifth kid. So here's a quick story. Like our fifth kid, my wife is pregnant. She gets in a car accident. My mother-in-law's in town. So she's like pregnant, like with our kid. Like I think like a couple of days later, she has the baby. She gets in a car accident. So like they're waiting for the police. So I come and see her. My mother-in-law takes the kids. So I'm just sitting on like the sidewalk with my wife, and we're just hanging out. And then it was just like I got on my phone. We started going to Spotify, like playing like music from when we dated, and it was just like a fun time. It was like, here it is, this kind of a crappy situation, and it was just because we enjoy each other's company. It's like, oh yeah, like you're fun, I enjoy your company, and it's like, oh yeah, Joel, you're fun. Like this is kind of how it was when we were like little teenagers dating, and it was fun again. Like we find those little moments. So I don't know if maybe we're using different words, but I would say vet for that for sure, because eventually, you raise babies and they're gone, and then what's left? Like what is there? That should be there.
Do you still have any of those letters?
Oh yeah, yeah. Those are like in a box put away. Where like if it was like there was like a, like I want to get, like if there's a fire, like I get my kids out and stuff like that. But that would be like something where it's like, yo, like I want to make sure to get those because they mean a lot. They mean a lot.
Yeah, my dad, when he was younger, went on I forget if it was a student exchange to Belgium, and would write love letters back, or I don't know if they were love letters or just letters back across the pond to my mom, and she kept them, and I didn't find out about them until I want to say probably 5-ish years ago. And I actually ended up like stealing a bunch of his handwriting to put a tattoo on my chest, right before I took a trip out to Thailand. But yeah, how important is sort of the influence of family and that uh, wholesomeness of having those love letters, and that's the start of that. How important is the influence of family in creating that culture of uh, of being able to foster that kind of love?
So you're talking about like my parents and things like that?
Yeah, just whole
Oh,
family unit. Like,
that's huge. My wife said that one of the reasons that she loved me was because of my family, the way that we interacted. So there's a part of me that just wants to kind of like regulate and be like, dude, stop being an idiot. But it's like, oh, like I came from a good family. Like my parents stayed together. My, like on both sides, pretty much everybody stayed together. Like I would go visit aunts and uncles, and it was always like, Joel, we're happy to see you. Or, so I've talked to people where it's like, yeah, the family is a wreck. There was a lot of affection in my home. Yeah, there was a lot of affection in my home, and because of that, I gave a lot of affection because that was just normal to me. Like I think maybe part of it is cultural. Like I'm Mexican, so we're pretty affectionate. But I've been around other families that are Mexican. They're not as affectionate as my family was. So I think that's a great question, because when you get married, it's actually two cultures that are coming together. And I don't mean culture like I'm Mexican and like somebody's white or black. I mean like your family has its own culture, your own way of doing things. So like when you are dating, like you go into your girlfriend's house, you see how they interact, you see how they do things. That stuff is going to come up again in the marriage because you recreate what you know. So when you get married, you are creating this new culture, but that's where a lot of arguments happen. It's like, we have this way of doing things. I have this way of doing things, and now we're coming together, and now what I'm used to having done is not being done, or this is how we do it, and you don't agree to it. So now we're having conflict. So like you can, like if you saw like I don't know if you have a girlfriend. You're married, right? I think I saw a ring. Yeah, so you're married. Like when you were like dating your wife, like you don't want to date her like and not know her family because that's dangerous. Because you have she's not cut off from her family. So if you don't know where her family comes from, like that's a huge blind spot. So I knew where my wife came from because like her her mom has known me basically since I was a teenage boy, you know. So like I know her. I know her family. So my family is not perfect, but my wife knows like where I come from. So if she sees that, it's like, yo, you knew what you were getting. Okay, doesn't mean that I don't. It's not a cop out to say like I don't change, but it's like you knew what you were getting.
You've talked about the fact that you've never seen a great husband be a bad father. And so you call yourself a marriage coach, but by proxy, I think you're also a little bit of a dad coach. What do you think is the biggest lesson that kids are missing today by not having this like holistic family unit?
So what are kids who do not have a father? What are they missing?
Or just disjointed family?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. I coached high school football for a few years before we had more kids, and it became like a lot to ask. And plus, I wanted to be around for my kids. It's a big time commitment. Which I enjoy, but it just in this season of my life. But the kids who had a father, you could coach them hard and they could take it. And the ones who didn't, you could tell that they didn't. They were they were more emotional. They'd kind of break down. Like if you would get on them, they would kind of collapse into themselves. So you would notice that. So like it's no coincidence that God calls himself a father. That's not a coincidence. That's his role. A father. A father trains you up. And every little boy and even every little girl asks the question like, do you love me and are you happy that I was born? And a father has to answer that question for their children. Yes, I love you. And yes, I'm happy that you were born. And if you look around, I think a lot of people, grown-ups, have this hole in their heart because they have a father hole. My daddy, who I was supposed to trust, left my mom. Now I'm unstable. Or he was just a sperm donor, right? Like he never cared. Or maybe he sent some money, so I had a roof over my head and I had some food and I had clothes. But yo, prisoners get that too. So I think that there's a big time hole in fatherhood. And if I go back, I think it goes to like men left God, so they left that responsibility also. It's just a continuation of that wreckage. They've men were created to worship and love God. And by ignoring that, this is why we have so much dysfunction.
What's the significance of naming your podcast after a niche football term?
I just wanted it like it just kind of was one of those things where it's like, if I'm going to be speaking to somebody, maybe I can get out these little nuggets that'll like turn the light on, because that's really what turned the light on for me. And so like, the podcast, I like doing it because I like talking to people, but I kind of wanted somebody to get something out of it. So I don't even know if that's the right way to go about it, but it was just like, sounds good to me. so so I'll roll with it. And then, maybe stuff like this where it's like, it'll open the door where I could talk a little bit about football. So that'll make me happy too. And so it's, tell some of these like little anecdotal stories. Yeah, I don't know if that's the wisest thing, but that took me so long to even get rolling that it was like, I didn't want to have any more like stumbling blocks, I guess, to get it out. But I just think that like that's just the way my mind kind of works, though. It's like there's a lot of like information being processed. Like, how can I sort it to get to the stuff that really matters? And I think once I understood that in a lot of cases that really happens, it's like, okay, like how could I apply it? So yeah, that's probably I haven't thought about that in a while, but yeah, that's probably it.
What's the best nugget that you've taken from the podcast and applied to your own life?
I had David Feldman on. I've had him on multiple times. But he had one that was like basically like the four stages of marriage. It's like you have like the honeymoon phase, the plateau phase, and then there was like two other ones because I haven't thought about that in a while, but that was just like one of the main ones. And it's just like, oh, that makes so much sense because that was like what I was going through too. It was, yeah, in this honeymoon phase, it's just me and my wife, and like I'm building a career, or trying to make some money, and then now the kids come, career stress, kid stress. It's like, oh, there's a strain in the marriage now. All right, and then there's this kind of like, well, what do I want my life to be kind of thing. Like I'm in my 40s now. It's like, hey, have I wasted my time? Am I doing something worthwhile? So I think that's like a big thing because I think a lot of men are kind of going through. A lot of men I talk to are kind of going through something similar when they come to me. It's like, yeah, I have financial success. I have success in business, and I'm physically fit. I'm strong, but my marriage sucks, and I really want that to mean something because I want to be able to come home and not even feel like I'm the man, but I just want to like I want to come home, and I want to come home because there's somewhere it's just like they don't want to come home because there's no peace in the house. Like I want to come home and be like happy to be home. So it's like these little things, like they're not like achievements that you put on your wall, but it's this thing where it's like it's a quality of life. Like I really want my life to feel like it matters more than personal or accomplishments.
It's legacy and purpose, right?
Purpose, yeah, because I don't know, like it uh like if I asked like who won the Academy Award in like 2002 or something, like, you'd be like, I don't know, but that was like a big deal. But like you say like how much did your parents mean to you? It's like, well, now you can kind of spout off all the things that your parents did for you. And um I was watching this interview with this comedian, and like he was like, yeah, before when you would ask me a question about like what my greatest accomplishment, he'd be like, yeah, name off all these movies and stuff that he did. And then he's like, now when you ask me, he was like, my greatest accomplishment was being like my mother's son. Like he was like, that's where I learned everything. And it was just like, oh wow, like it's always nice to kind of hear like people who've kind of been on the quote unquote top of the mountain be like, this is what really matters. Like we've we've chased success, like we've been given this definition of success that's not really the case. Like the definition of success is to be who God made you to be. Like that's it. Like you run your race. It's not my race. It's gonna look different for you. To say like, hey, you got to make X amount of dollars, that you have to have X amount of kids, that you have to have X amount of cars, X amount of accomplishments. It's like God might not have had that for you, or you could have actually been successful in something that well, yeah, you were successful in that, but that's not actually where God wanted you to be. You kind of wasted your life. That's a kind of a hard pill to swallow. And I tried that too, because I tell my clients, like, I did not want to be talking about like marriage and leadership. I wanted to be in real estate and business, like I wanted to talk about that stuff. Talking about marriage, like that wasn't me, bro.
It's funny how you never end up where you intended to go, but somehow always land in the right place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a reason why people win Olympic medals or win a World Cup, and still the most important day of their life is when their kids are born, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
She knows you're upset, so you stop. So stop saying you're not when you are. It's a tweet you had.
Mm-hmm. It's a banger.
Is there a moment that comes to mind for you?
Oh, I do it all the time. That's why. It's like there's this part of me that's like you don't admit weakness, and so like to admit that I'm upset is like almost like weakness. So it's like, are you upset? No, I'm good. But now my countenance has changed towards her. I'm not as sweet towards her. It's like it's this, I don't know. So there's like a good part of like playing sports and having this attitude of like nothing bothers me. Things don't hurt. Like, and again, like I wasn't like some kind of like all-star, but it was just like, I very much wanted to embody the like kind of like the competitive aspect of it. And it helps and serves. It helps and serves in that arena for sure. It helps and serves in business, but it doesn't always apply in marriage. And that's where like wisdom comes. It's like, hey, this thing that you do, it's really helped you move forward and be successful. But in this arena, you need to take a step back. So like that, admitting that something is bothering me is like it's like what is the issue? What's my pride? Now, I think like especially like in a Christian sense, like pride has like this bad connotation, but you should have pride in like yourself and like confidence and stuff like that. But there's also the pride where it's like, no, this is your ego, where you're not able to admit that you did something wrong. Like that's the kind of pride, or like you want glory when you don't deserve glory. So yeah, that's something that I think is big for men, because there is this thing of I don't admit that I'm hurt or that I'm wrong, because somehow if I admit that I'm hurt or I'm wrong, that makes me vulnerable, and I don't want to admit that I'm vulnerable, that you can hurt me, or that I'm hurt like I'm some little boy. It's like I'm a grown ass man. I don't get hurt. It's like, no, man. Like you're still human, and you still make mistakes, and you know those those things where it's like you don't admit, it's like this could be resolved in like 5 minutes, but I'll drag it a couple hours, maybe a day or two, I don't know, depending on how stubborn I'm feeling. So it's just like, yo, like that was me personally talking to myself, but I know that other men do the same thing.
When you get into that mode of upset or stress, obviously it's not a unfamiliar position for a lot of guys. Is there any practical steps or things that help you? Um, or is it just sort of time to work it out with yourself?
I've found that like for me, sometimes I'm not even sure why I'm upset. And so like my wife is very quick in an argument to like understand where she's coming from, but but I'm like my emotions, like I'm more like logic and action, and then my feelings come later. And then so it's like, well, why? Like I need to kind of step away to be like, well, why am I feeling this way? And once I can step away and be like, oh, this is why I am hurt, because I wanted to spend time with her and I didn't get it. So that's what bothered me. Now I can come and say, "Hey, this is why I got mad." Like we had an argument. So we had a date plan, and like I said earlier, like to have a date, like we have to like there's a lot of moving parts that have to get sorted out. So we were going to have a date, and then it came out that she was she might not have made the date because she had something come up. She was gonna have some kind of meeting or something that she needed to go to, and then so I got upset. Now I did the whole like, what's wrong? Like, nah, nothing. But I didn't know like why I was upset at first. So I had to kind of like, once I thought about it, and we had argued already, because like like it's okay, like for me it's like it's not okay to be sad, but I can be angry. Like that's the thing, like I allow myself as a man, like I'm mad, and I can yell, or just um criticize because I'm angry. So I make things worse. Okay. But once I like give myself time to think like, well, why was I mad? I was like, oh, because I wanted to go on a date and we haven't had a date in a long time. I was hurt. So then I can go to her and say, oh, I'm sorry because, you know, you had this thing and I kind of knew that this was a possibility, but I didn't think about it. And then once you reminded me that this was a possibility, I was hurt because I wanted to go on the date with you. That's why I'm hurt. So now I'm so because I can recognize it for myself that, oh, I wasn't mad at her. I was mad because I just wanted some time with her. And so when I apologized, it was like, oh, I'm sorry because for reacting that way or treating you that way. That's not right. And this is why I did it, because I was able to kind of self-reflect. So I think the long way to answer that is like to self-reflect and actually like understand your feelings and your emotions, but your thoughts too. So it's not like this soft, like I didn't have to like journal about it. It was just like, yo, like when I'm working out, like I'm thinking about, yo, why did I get so mad? Why? Oh, we haven't gone on a date in months and we just got a sitter and we have like this window, because that's kind of like when you have like this many variables, it's like you got to find these windows, and like if you miss the window, then it's like, well, we'll see when the next time happens. It could be, a couple days, it could be, I don't know. It's been a while since we've had a date, actually, now that I think about it, but that's kind of where we're at.
Obviously, the logistics of date night with 5 kids is exceedingly difficult. How do you still manage to find little ways to create space for your wife to be your wife instead of mom all the time?
That's a tough one because we homeschool too, so they're always home. The kids are always around, so she's always mom. The baby always needs her. Um, she'll have like she'll go and do her workouts, so she'll like get out of the house and go do her workout, so that'll be like a few hours, and she has her own kind of business that she works on, so I'll find opportunities where it's like, hey, like I'll take the kids and you can go have a few hours to yourself, but it's a challenge. That's a big time challenge. Like there's like we had just discussed, hey, how about I get you an Airbnb or a hotel room for like a day or two, so you can just go, like, just I'll take care of it, because I work from home too, so I'm here, and I get to do stuff like this, but it's a lot harder for her to do, because the baby always like wants her and needs her, so it's a challenge, for sure, but it's just finding those little, like, hey, you want to work out? Okay, let's make sure that we can make that happen. Scheduling is like huge in our house. Like, what is the schedule? Like later on today, we have a schedule for later on today. It's like, okay, this is where we got to go. You're picking up, I'm dropping off. This kid's going over here to this thing. What do we have going on tomorrow? Dinner. Like so we run on. We don't have like a tight schedule, but it's like some things are just like, hey, this is what needs to get done, and we do it every week. So scheduling is big, to be able to like, where are your opportunities to take I don't like the term me time, but I don't know what else to call it. Like, hey, go have your time for yourself. Yeah, where you can just be, not mom for a few hours. It is a challenge. I mean, ideally, you'd want to have like lots of family around or lots of babysitter options, but that's just not the case in our case. So it's like, all right, well, we just kind of power through it. Some things it's just like, yeah, we just got to power through it.
No one should have higher standard for you than you. So when she's nagging you, is she really nagging you, or does she just have a higher standard for you than you do?
What did you think about that one? I'm kind of curious.
I think it's great. I think if there's not, if you don't have the capability to assume that you are the best person that you can be, and that there is someone else that believes that there is a better part of you out there, you should be doing everything that you can to try to be that person. So if there's any gap there between, and someone has to tell you that there's a gap, you're clearly not doing something right.
Hmm. Yeah, that was like after like on a long enough timeline, like you're gonna stumble, right? You're not gonna live up to your expectations, your potential, your promise, some kind of like however you want to word that. Um, so yeah, like for me, it was like, oh, is she nagging me or is she, she politely ask me a few times already and I didn't get the message and now she's frustrated. Not that she's frustrated with me, but it's just kind of one of those things where it's like, I know you're I know you're better than this. And like that's one of the hard things about marriage is like your warts and all are gonna be exposed. Are you okay with it? And I think that's why some people avoid marriage because it's like, yo, your warts are gonna get exposed in some form, right? Like I'm not I'm working on being more handy. Like doing handiwork is really frustrating to me. Like I'm really good at like being affectionate with my kids, playing with my kids, but like teaching them to be like handy, that's something that's like, ah man, I want to I'd like to work on that more. Or like even like musical, like I don't know any instruments. It's like, oh, I'd like to work on that so I can do that with my kids. So going back to the nagging part though, it's like, yeah, like sometimes it's like, oh, you're allowing yourself to slack. And it's like you can't slack because you promised her, like she like some people will be like, oh, like women will get married because like you have the promise of like making a lot of money. It's like I didn't have any of that. Like I wanted to be a teacher. Like there was no like, oh, there's he's gonna be like this Mr. Moneybags, like, like some people like, oh, he could be a pro athlete. I had none of that. Like there was no question I was not gonna, like there was no like financial upside, so to speak, that was like you could see it in me, that I thought of anyway. It was just she just wanted to be with me. And so are you being consistent with who you said you were? No, I'm not. Like when I struggled in my marriage, it was because it was like everything became a chore. The things that I would do gladly because it was just like, man, I'm with you. Now, now they're a problem. So, yeah, like I just think as a man too, like you want to have you like I don't think anybody should have higher expectations of me than me just as a man.
Yeah, I guess that sort of relates into the next one here. And you say all men love to hear that they're the head of the household, but they don't like to hear that they're also the foundation. No one cares about the foundation, but everything rests on it. So
Mhm.
having that responsibility and doing what you say you're going to do, like if you consistently take chips out of that foundation by not saying what, or by not following through on what you say you're going to do, that's a pretty rough foundation to start with. It looks like my current foundation that's leaking through from the 1800s.
The foundation is not nobody like ever goes to like a fancy building. It's like, let's go look at the foundation. It's like, no, let's go look at this fancy building, but it's the foundation that it rests on. So like I get that men want like credit or like pats on the back for doing it, but the part of being a man is just like, yo, like you're the foundation, so there's no pats on the back for doing that. That's just part of being a man. And like you do it because this is your family, you love them, they're there because of you. Like everybody there is because of you. So there's things you're gonna have to do, and you're not gonna get any kudos for it. It's just, like this is part of being a husband and a father. Your family rests on you. You want to be the head honcho and have the final say. Well, you know what? You better be laying that foundation.
Yeah, it's because what's the alternative, right? And I think we've sort of moved into this almost countercultural movement where family is now countercultural of everybody just wants only the responsibility of themselves and not the responsibility of other people. And I think life gets pretty lonely in the back half if you don't have some sort of responsibility to take with you.
Well, that's the covenant. That's the commitment, right? Like that's the foundation. Like most marriage, like I've seen some people like, yeah, marriage is not that hard. It's like, okay, yeah. I I I don't ever say I had like a bad year of marriage, but I had years where there was more bad days. I've had that. Um, but yeah, the commitment is everything. Like like if the commitment's not there, then it's just like, oh, you didn't do this thing, okay, I'm out. Like that doesn't work that way. Like this whole like marriage is 50-50 thing. No, that's like I've had instances where my wife is sick, so who has to do everything? Me. Oh, it's 50-50. No, it's not. I had instances where I had no money. Guess who was supporting us? My wife was. Now, I didn't like that, but that's what it was. Okay? So this 50-50 thing is it's like, yo, that's you can run a business partnership, you can 50-50 is like you going to McDonald's and paying your money and them giving you a burger. That's 50-50. If that's what you want, like, good luck. The divorce is not going to be 50-50.
How important is setting the example as a father? You told a story of when you're a kid driving past some strip club billboards and your dad's staring straight ahead. How important is the observation of what you're doing versus what you're saying as a father?
I think it's everything. Kids have you figured out. Like that's a scary thing about being a dad. It really is. Like I'll see my kids do something and be like, "Ooh, I know where that comes from." And that's not good. That comes from me. That is scary. Um like I want my kids to have a strong work ethic. If they're not working, it's like, well, where are they seeing that? Oh, that's me. One of the reasons, I used to work out at the gym, and then it was like I was like, well, my kids never see me work out though. So I got a home, I got a home gym set up. So like I work out in a home gym now. And what happens? Oh, Daddy, can I come work out with you? I never said come do a workout. It was just, oh, Daddy's there. This is what we do. Like this is what my daddy does. I want to be like my daddy. So yeah, my dad never my dad never was like we I would say like people would say like we were religious, but like my dad was just like he was just a sweet man and he just kind of did what he did. He didn't like have to like talk about it. Like he never told me like, "Hey, don't go and like have sex with lots of women." He never told me that. It was just I saw him love my mom and I saw him like when there was billboards for strip clubs that like he didn't even look. I got the lesson, right? He never even like it probably was never he probably never even thought about it, right? It was just like he was just doing what he was doing. My dad never drank. He never told me not to drink, but I never saw my dad drink. So I did drink, but then once my first kid was born, I was like, you know what? I want to be like my dad, and I'm not going to drink. So it's not to say that when they turn 21, maybe I'll have a beer with them or something. Like I left that open, but for the time being, it's like I those examples stood out to me for my father, and it kept me out of a lot of trouble. Like I never had like, oh dang, like this girl's slashing my tires, or I gotta go, get tested for STDs. Like I never had that because it was just I never put myself in those situations. It kept me out of a lot of trouble. So yeah, Kids don't do what you say, they do what you do. And I mean, you can lie to yourself and say, yeah, they're gonna I'm forceful enough, I'm charismatic enough, I'm persuasive enough. Nah, they're gonna do what you do. And that goes back to like that culture part of, right, like of vetting your wife, of like seeing where her family comes from, because she could tell you like, I'm a I'll just say a Christian or believer or whatever, but you look at her family like, well, I mean, you might be a black sheep, but this is where you come from. This is what your experience is. Or you say you're clean and tidy, but then I go to your home and it's not. So people will show you who they are over time. And so yeah, I think that's why just your actions. I always want my actions to line up to what my beliefs are. They don't all the time, but you know that's where grace comes in. But for sure, like it's super important.
What's something you spent a lot of time doing that I should skip entirely
What do you mean?
in general in marriage? Is there something that comes to mind that
Um, I don't know, because I never thought about that. Because it's one of those things where it's like everything that I've been through has gotten me to this point. So there's nothing wasted. So it's like one of those things where, um, like if you need to learn that lesson, then it's gonna keep on showing up until like you pass the test, so to speak. Like, is there something that you're doing currently that you're like, you know what, this is not. I guess that's really the thing. Like, I don't know if it's like what you shouldn't be doing. It's more of like what you should be doing is like auditing yourself. Like I do that, quite a bit. Like, how am I doing? Like, I never had this like idea of like, oh, I'm gonna be like this mogul type person with Warren Buffett, Elon Musk type. Like it was like I want to be a good husband and a good father. That should be good enough. That was like always like my goal. I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good father. So it's like going back to that. Am I being congruent? Are my actions lining up with a man who wants to be a good husband and a good father? So I think it's not what to avoid. I think my mind works on like what should you actually be focused on, because if you focus on those things, then you kind of avoid the trapping. So it was like just say like sports, for instance, right? Like it's not like, oh, do I want to avoid injury? It's like, no, what kind of exercises do I focus on so that I don't get injured? Or I don't want to have a bad game. It's like, no, I don't focus on not having a bad game. I focus on these are the habits that I need to focus on so that it goes well for me. So I think maybe that's why I have a hard time with that question, because I don't think of like what should I avoid. I think it's more of like, if I focus on this, then like when they ask Jesus in the Bible, what are the top two, what are the what's the top commandments? He says, love God with all your heart and love your neighbor. And if you take care of those two things, then everything else kind of takes care of itself. That's kind of how I I look at it. Like, my marriage is not right. Okay, so what is a target that if I aimed for that thing, then like all these other things kind of come with it. I think that's more of the way I look at it.
yeah, it's the story of the hero versus the anti-hero and setting your life up not necessarily in the service of avoiding being the anti-hero, but actually striving to move towards the hero and be the best person.
So I I have certain buttons that if like you push them, then like I go. Kind of like Back to the Future. Like if you call McFly a chicken, like it's like, oh, it's his button. He's going right. Like I have certain buttons that are kind of like that. And I remember like I did something, and it didn't work out. And my wife told me, she was like, I knew that was gonna happen. And I was like, well, why didn't you say something? You didn't ask, and you were gonna do it anyway. It cost me some money, and it cost me a lot of time and kind of heartache. So it's a cheat code, because it's like, here's this other person who has your best interest at heart, who knows you, but who also compliments you. Like my wife is very intuitive. She's like very good with she's very good with people. She she can read people really well. Where I'm like more like logical action. Like let me kind of like get in here and just kind of start hammering away at certain things. Like she cover her strengths cover my weaknesses. My strengths cover her weaknesses, and that's the cheat code. Like nobody else knows my fears, my dreams, like she does. Like you can talk to your boys, you can talk to your parents. Like some people I guess might have like really like, but I'm a private person, like big time. Like nobody knows me like my wife does. That's the cheat code. Nobody cheers me on like she does. Like a word from her is there's no they're like if there was a crowd of people, like I can hear her voice, because that's how much she matters to me. So the cheat code is like here's this person who has your best interests at heart, who knows you, whose strengths cover your weaknesses. Like going to like a sports analogy, Michael Jordan won no championships until Scottie Pippen showed up. Scottie Pippen won no championships without Michael Jordan. They both played the game of basketball, but they had different roles, and because they were able to do these different things, that's why they won.
Just sort of wrapping things up here. Do you have a favorite client story that comes to mind of somebody that you've worked with?
Yeah, I had a client very successful in business, like super successful in business. His he took care of his physique, so it's like, like all the outward appearances were like, hey, this guy is killing it. And he even said that he's like, yeah, all outward appearances say I'm killing it, but I come home and I can't stand being home. I would rather I'd rather my wife be gone. Like I could kind of care less. And so we start he's like I know that's not good. So which is like the big, like any client I work with, that's always got to be the acknowledgement of like I got to take responsibility here. So I gave him an assignment when we first started. And I was like, "Oh, give me like 10 things that you're grateful for her, or that you like about her, or that you love about her." The next week is like, I couldn't think of anything. I was like, "Ooh, this is tough." And I even asked like, "Hey, when you guys were like dating, was there like magic sparks, butterflies?" Like he's like, "No, not really." I was like, "Why did you get married?" It just seemed like the next thing to do. I was like, "Ooh, that's tough." All right. So, not a lot to work with, but he was committed. So one of the things I asked him, I was like, "Oh, does your wife have great taste?" He's like, "Nah, not really." I was like, "Oh, that's strange. She picked you, right?" And he was like, "Oh, yeah, she did. So she has good taste, right?" He's like, "Oh, I see where you're going with this, Joel." Like, all right, cool. So she has great taste. Like, how about we start with that? Like, let's start with this one thing to be grateful for. She has great taste, because everything that was like he could find negative, like he found negative and he dwelled on that. So the big thing is just like, going back to gratitude. Like, let's find things to be grateful for. He was like, sex is so infrequent. I wish I was asexual. Like, I wish I was like, just didn't have the urge at all. So we did some work, and one of the things that he had was like, compassion was a sign of weakness as for him growing up. And so that was something that, what do you know, his wife needed. She was getting no compassion from him. So we did some exercises to help him work on his compassion. He sends me some messages like, "Hey, yeah, so my wife woke me up in the middle of the night so we could have sex." I was like, "Oh, nice." Like, hell yeah. So these things are like, they're always, you never arrive. Like, you never arrive in fitness. Like, I was talking to somebody, it's like, you don't ever just like get to like be like an Olympic level athlete and be like, you know what? Workouts are done. I am done. Like, No, it's like it's constant work. There's going to be good days, there's going to be bad days. But the thing was, now that he understood who he was, he understood what his wife needed, and now she you know, he would send me messages and he would be like, she sent me this message like, who is this man? Because it was like, this was the man, this wasn't even the man that she married. Like, he is a better version, and now his family is better because of that, because he was having a hard time connecting with some of his kids. There was issues there too. That's why I say, like, you got to love your wife first, because that sets the conditions, the environment in the family. Now the kids feel secure. Now they feel loved. Oh, my dad loves my mom. My mom respects my dad. Oh, I should listen to my mom because dad is now loving, like my kids, if they talk crazy to my wife, you go, bro, you don't talk to her that way. No. You're going to get checked real quick. So yeah, that's kind of an extra story in there, but yeah, that's probably my favorite, just because it was like, there was no, I have some who were like, oh yeah, like she was my fantasy girl and like all that, and that's great. But this one was like, yeah, I just got married just cause. I'm like, oh, okay, man, let's do this, baby.
Well, if that's not a shining testimonial for the work that you're doing, I don't really know what is, but I appreciate you, brother, and you're doing some great work and saving some marriages. And if we want to send people to the new courses coming up or get in touch with you, where should we send them?
I'm pretty much on Twitter exclusively, I guess. I'm not really anywhere else, so that's at the Joel Lopez, TheeJoelLopez.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you coming on the show, and catch you on Twitter.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for having me on.